go-go dancer in rural Ohio vanished without a trace, leaving investigators without a single clue as to her whereabouts. The case went unsolved for 26 years, until a homemade box, tool mark analysis, and an old car provided hints to where she had gone. Farm country of Wayne County, Ohio, was home to 19-year-old Janice Hartman.
Janice was a free spirit, and she was raised with two brothers. Tomboy effect. I mean, she climbed a tree with the best of us.
And as with most teenagers, she had a boyfriend, 19-year-old John Smith.
He is kind of a come on down to the bar and see me dance. She didn't take all her clothes off.
One night after work, she was invited to a private party. Janice told friends later there was heavy drinking at the party and also drugs. Several men asked Janice to dance. And at some point, things got out of control.
She was drunk. These other guys appeared to be drunk. Some of the gentlemen at this party attempted to rape her, attempted to sexually assault her, became very abusive.
Eventually, Janice talked her way out of the situation and left. She immediately filed a formal complaint.
She went directly to the police department at the time and told them the whole story, took statements and the whole 9 yards, everything she needed to do, and then she needed protection.
Janice returned to the nightclub and go-go dancing, but what happened at the party haunted her.
She went over to my mom's a couple of nights after that whole situation happened, and she mentioned to my sister that, hey, I'm going away for a while, I'll be gone, don't worry.
And with that, Janice disappeared without taking her clothes or her car.
If you're going to leave the area, you're going to need things to go with. You're going to need your clothing, you're going to need means of transportation.
Police interviewed the men who allegedly assaulted Janice at the party. They admitted the situation had gotten out of hand, but they said they had no idea where Janice was.
Because of her lifestyle, this bar-hopping go-go dancer disappears one day, just a few days after she was nearly raped by a bunch of guys. Police, I think, assume that she just led this dangerous lifestyle, and it finally caught up with her.
And for the next 26 years, no one saw or heard anything more from Janice Hartman. Janice Hartman disappeared just days after several men tried to rape her at a party. At first, investigators assumed her disappearance was somehow related to the incident.
Here's a young, troubled girl who's in her early 20s, who's hanging out with a bunch of questionable people, probably smoking some marijuana, having a good time. She probably ran away for a while.
The case eventually turned cold. And after years with no further information, the Hartman family gradually accepted the idea that they would never see Janice again.
When there's someone missing, you always have this hole. I'm telling you, it's like a hole in your heart. You'll have it. It's never filled.
20 long years passed. Then everything changed with one telephone call. It was from a woman who called Gary, asking for his sister Janice.
I sat down on the edge of the bed and took the phone call, and I'm saying, yes, I'm Janice's brother.
And I said, I understand your sister was married to John Smith.
And I said, yes, she was married to John Smith, but she's missing.
And I said, well, our sisters have one thing in common. They were both married to John Smith. And I said, my sister's missing. Gary Hartman's reply was, my God, lady, you got a problem. My sister's been missing since November of '74, never to be heard from again.
Sherry, the woman who called, said her sister, 49-year-old Betty Fran, had been married to John Smith for only a few months, and Smith had lied to Betty and her family about his past.
He presented him.
20 years earlier, witnesses told investigators that they saw John Smith in the club watching his first wife dance on the night she disappeared.
John was not the type of person who would want his wife or even his ex-wife to be dancing in a skimpy outfit at a bar in front of men.
Another witness saw Smith and Janice leave together at closing time.
The divorce was final. John was still trying to win her back. She was dating other men. So this was like a pot that was just boiling and boiling and boiling and boiling.
Janice's family long suspected John Smith was somehow involved in her disappearance. Smith had a temper and had been abusive towards Janice during their marriage.
I was playing a game of chess with him one day. I nailed him with a checkmate. And he just looked at the board, took his arm,
Decided to pay Michael a visit. At first, Michael was unwilling to answer their questions.
After that interview, Michael went home and talked to his wife. He searched his soul. Michael had had a secret, and it had been eating at him for years. And he searched his conscience, and he decided that he was going to turn on his brother.
Michael told the FBI a horrifying tale. He said shortly after his brother's first wife, Janice, disappeared, he saw John building a wooden box in his grandparents' garage.
He thought that the shape was odd. It had an odd dimension to it. It was about 4 foot in length, but it was rather short.
John said he would use the box to store Janice's belongings.
Michael found this very perplexing and didn't know what to think of it. And why was he building a box to put her clothing in?
If you're going to build a box to store things, you need to build it deep like a chest. And John became angry with his brother at this time, so Michael left the garage, went back into the grandparents' home.
Later that night, Michael went back out to the garage and looked through the window.
John is now packing clothing items into that box, which was completed. Michael thought it was odd how he was packing. He was taking the clothing and rolling it up and laying it along the outside edges of that box. His brother was crying during the time he was packing these clothing items.
But where was the wooden box now, 21 years later? Investigators learned that John Smith's stepfather was pouring the concrete foundation in an apartment complex around the time John removed the box. Ground-penetrating radar found a potential grave underneath the garage floor.
The highway construction people, actually using giant saws, removed a portion of the garage floor, and then with excavation, materials were removed and screened by the FBI evidence response team.
But they found nothing. Investigators contacted every law enforcement agency and coroner in the state, asking if they knew
Her face in the dress, it was like looking at Jan, like she was there with us, and it was chilling to see it.
The image that is shown on that nightgown to this day is just a very unnerving image.
After all this time, was it possible that forensic science could identify the remains and also expose her killer? Authorities in Indiana exhumed the remains of the unidentified woman they had buried a decade earlier. The bones were taken to forensic anthropologist Frank and Julie Saul.
When we did the x-rays, we determined that we were dealing with someone in early 20s.
The pelvic bones indicated the instrument used. Handsaws have teeth, which alternately bend to the right and left, making a W-shaped cut. The teeth cut a swath through the bone that's wider than the rest of the blade. But the instrument used to cut these bones made a V-shaped cut, jagged on one side and smooth on the other.
It has teeth on one side, and it's a fairly good description of a serrated knife. It'd take a lot of strength to actually do that, or what I would say is a lot of motivation.
A bone fragment was sent to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. for mitochondrial DNA analysis. When compared with the mitochondrial DNA from Janice Hartman's mother, there was a match. The body was Janice Hartman.
I don't know what kind of human being can do something like that. He's a sick man. Sociopath was a term that I heard used more than once.
Investigators searched motor vehicle records and discovered John Smith's old Corvette sports car was now in the possession of a car collector in New Jersey who had kept it in pristine condition. Measurements revealed Janice's coffin could have easily fit inside the car, and there was other evidence.
The FBI agent noted scratches on the dash as well as the rear window of that Corvette, which would be consistent with the edges of a box that size being placed in the vehicle.
26 years after Janice Hartman disappeared, John Smith was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors believe Smith was angry that Janice divorced him and that he also objected to her work as a dancer. Smith heard about the incident at the party Janice attended.